It's time for the
Daly
Planet Podcast Show. So sit back, relax, and give us a go. Scott and Matt and maybe a guest have undertaken an epic pod quest. We're gonna ramble on about movies and books and television and film festivals and directors and all this other stuff that I really know nothing about because they made this really long list of things that they want to talk about and I can't even read through all of them, but it's gonna be great. Okay, start the show.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Planet Podcast, formerly the Weekly Planet Podcast, but we are trying to get on iTunes and apparently someone already stole that name. We will still be weekly and we will still be talking about movies, TV, books, and anything else we feel like talking about. So nothing's changed except for the name, which is unfortunate. But we are trying to get on iTunes, so that's good news. My name, by the way, is Scott Daly, editor-in-chief of dailyplanetfilms.com, and I'm joined as always by my co-host and co-editor Matt Freeman. Matt, how you doing?
I'm doing all right, Scott. I think it's not so bad that we're changing the name. We're not too far into this series, so it's not a bad time to make little adjustments like that.
Absolutely. No one will notice in a month.
Yeah.
But I would like to say goodbye to my insanely clever name that I was really proud of.
Yeah, it is a shame.
Yeah, it is. It is. Anyway, we are here today to talk about The Martian, a movie that both of us enjoyed. But before we get into all that, we're going to try a new segment here, which is movie news. Got a couple things that I'd like to talk to you about, see what your opinion on them is, and then we can move right along. So first and foremost is Quentin Tarantino. As you know, and the listeners probably know, Quentin's got a new movie coming out in December, The Hateful Eight. What you might not know is that he is releasing a 70mm film edition that's coming out 2 weeks before the movie goes wide. That's old news. The new news is that this cut of the film is going to be different than the regular theatrical cut. Quentin has said that because it's a larger theater, it's more of the old school CinemaScope type of presentation. This cut kind of lingers on things a little longer. It's kind of more expansive to fit that kind of theater setting, but he thinks that people that will end up watching this movie on Showtime or something don't want to see those shots, so he's going to cut them. What do you think about this, Matt?
Well, it's really interesting. It's funny because my first thought is that this is a cynical grab for more viewership and more people go to see the movie earlier. But actually, then my immediate second thought is this is actually Quentin Tarantino we're talking about, and he's sort of a artist, to a fault. So he probably just legitimately had to do both versions of these movies, and this is his vision. So I have no problem with this. I probably won't see either of these in the theater just because that's how my schedule works out. But I am excited about this movie.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think if this were any other director, I'd think money grab. This is just a marketing ploy. But Quentin loves film, loves shooting on film and projecting on film, and this kind of falls into that whole thing. I'm excited. I think the 70mm cut is over 3 hours long. So I think you're right. It is a thing that maybe this cut just never would have made it to theaters if it wasn't for this special showing. I haven't heard if it's going to be shown in Dallas. I would assume we're a big enough city to do it, so I hope I get to see it. But it's kind of exciting.
Yeah, it'll be cool if you get to see both and contrast them. I'd definitely like to hear about differences that you perceive if you do get to do that.
Well, I'm sure one day we will do an entire podcast on Quentin Tarantino.
Yes.
And I will bring that up. We might want to bring Michael in for that one because he has differing opinions than the two of us. Yeah.
That always makes for a good time arguing with Michael. Yep.
Well, I think that would turn into a shouting match, actually. The other thing I wanted to talk about is a movie that came out last week that I saw, the Peter Pan prequel Pan. This movie is awful. And luckily, unlike a lot of the awful movies that I see, its awfulness is not being rewarded. Pan tanked at the box office this week, making $15 million on a estimated $150 million budget. So not even taking marketing into account, this movie's going to lose a lot of money. And I think Warner Brothers is estimating $130 to $150 million. It's been a rough year for Warner Brothers. This is not their first movie that's tanked, and it might not be the last. They're really hoping for a good 2016 though, because they've got all their DC comic stuff coming out then.
Well, yeah, I like to see the free market taking a hand in affairs and slapping down these prequels where essentially there's like some sort of spec script where they realize they have a piece of intellectual property and it's popular, and they decide they're going to make another movie about it and just cram together all the elements for nostalgia purposes and churn out a movie. And unfortunately, it actually makes them money fairly often, so I guess that's why they keep doing it. But hopefully this will give them a little bit of feedback in the other direction. Absolutely.
Yeah, and in a summer that saw Jurassic World, which is a terrible movie, becoming the third highest grossing movie of all time, it's good to see something terrible not get rewarded.
Yeah.
So good. Let's leave Peter Pan alone and stop doing origin story reboot stuff, please.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, that's all I had for some of the big news. Do you have anything else you'd want to talk about?
Yeah, I guess I saw a movie recently. I finally saw Avengers 2.
Oh, nice.
Which I don't know if I'm going to disagree with the consensus here, but like I was pretty drastically disappointed by most of the movie. In particular, so I was watching it with my family, and I was like, oh, this will be good. This is a big tentpole blockbuster movie, and everyone will enjoy this. And I put it on, and within like 5 minutes, everyone except me had left the room just out of like boredom and confusion, because it just begins. And at the beginning is honestly the worst part. It's just this completely nonsensical, poorly CGI'd battle scene where you really don't know any of the characters unless you pretty much just watch the previous movie, and it takes about half an hour before the movie bothers to like introduce you to the characters again. So you're just really struggling for a long time, and the movie never really connects with any of its attempts to make a dramatic story. The only good part probably is like the voice acting for the villain. That was consistently my favorite part. I don't know. Did you feel differently? Did you like this movie?
So I don't think I feel as negative as you did. Like I said in our summer podcast movie, I actually liked Ant-Man better than this movie. Mm-hmm. I did like it though. I think, I'm not telling you should watch it again, but I think on a second watching, a lot of the themes become more appreciable. Mm-hmm. It's actually, and the movie's over the top, and it's almost too big, and some of the action scenes I got bored. The Hulkbuster Hulk battle between mm-hmm. Iron Man and Hulk, I got bored because that's just a CGI slog.
Yeah.
But I think the quieter moments of the film work really well. I think Hawkeye getting to be like one of the major focuses of the film. He's given some of the best lines in the film, and he kind of brings the human side to everything, because these are gods more or less, or sometimes literally. Mm-hmm. I mean, I definitely see your point, and I worry with a movie like that the big explosive Marvel movies are going to start getting boring. But I do think that there's something there that I enjoyed, and definitely on a second viewing, some of the themes. I don't know if you caught that each one of the Avengers independently calls themselves a monster at different points during the film, and that's like that I thought was a really subtle, well done thing that I didn't pick up at all until my second viewing. that kind of ties into how they view themselves and the differences between the ideologies of each of them and what they're trying to do. It's not the smartest movie. I'm not trying to say Avengers is a smart, nuanced movie, but it does have some subtext in there that I did enjoy.
Yeah, no, I mean that's cool. Like, yeah, I'm not saying the entire thing was just the worst movie ever. I just was disappointed, in particular in the beginning, where I almost stopped watching it. Actually, when I was like, "Is this the whole movie going to be like this?" But yeah, it did pick up, and I agree that you're reminding me now that you're talking about it. The Hawkeye part was actually pretty compelling. So yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I'm after Ant-Man, I'm optimistic for what the third phase is going to look like. But yeah, I mean, I think the first Avengers was definitely better.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right. Well, the movie that I saw was Pan. We already talked about that a bit. I also just got back from a movie called Room, which is a film based off a book about a woman who's abducted and locked into a room for 7 years and basically repeatedly sexually abused by her captor, ends up getting pregnant and having a kid, and the movie's kind of told from the perspective of the kid who was born and lives in this tiny little garden shed. It was a depressing and powerful movie that I would really recommend. I'm probably going to write a review on it because I feel like talking about it, so look for that. But really good film. I think it comes out Friday.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. Don't really personally feel the urge to watch that, but but I definitely think that art like that, should be made. I just always hesitate to subject myself to it.
Yeah, I agree. So the book, apparently, my girlfriend had read the book, and it's told like entirely from the perspective of the kid. So it's like in the style how a child would talk, especially one that's never experienced the outside world. They tried to stick as close to that as they could in the film, like that everything's set up kind of from the kid's point of view and how he would experience all the things that are going on. They did a good job with that. It also has Brie Larson in it as the woman, who's like one of my favorite actresses ever. So she does another incredible job here. I don't know if you ever saw Short Term 12.
No.
That was her first starring role, I think.
Okay. We'll have to look up this person in this movie also.
Yeah, and everyone listening should as well, because they're both really good. Okay. I don't know when it's a small indie movie, so I know it's going to be a limited release starting Friday. It's not showing here in Dallas at all. I just got a Film Society sneak preview thing.
Okay.
But anyway, we are here to talk about Matt Damon. I mean, The Martian.
That's right.
Who? Matt Damon.
Well, but also the book, which graced with Matt Damon's picture on the cover now.
That is true. I'm sure that increased sales by tenfold. Mm-hmm. As you've probably noticed by now, since we've been talking for about 10 minutes, we do not have a special guest today. We were hoping to get my sister, Cindy Daly, on the podcast because she read the book with us. One thing we did when we were planning for this podcast and planning for our book club as well, is we recorded kind of practice podcasts where we read The Martian and talked about it just with each other and just shared it with each other. So all three of us talked about this book a lot for like over 2 hours. And we're going to talk about it again and how it compares with the movie. So thanks, Cindy, for helping us with that. And sorry you didn't get a chance to see the movie because you decided to have children instead. But hopefully you will, and then you get to weigh in. So let's talk The Martian. We'll start with the movie, I think, Matt, and then we'll kind of go back and forth as necessary. First, just overall, what did you think of the film?
Well, I was actually very pleasantly surprised by a couple of things. I guess the most general.
Should we summarize it? I mean, I feel like if people are listening to this, they kind of know what the movie is, but Do we want to give a summary?
Sure. Yeah, do you want me to summarize it?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so there's it's just an astronaut. There's a Mars mission, and there's a team of astronauts have been on Mars, and there's an emergency evacuation ordered because of a storm, and the astronauts evacuate, except one of them is struck by debris in the escape, and he's left for dead, and but he's not actually dead, and the whole book is essentially about his his struggle to survive in this unimaginably hostile environment, with very little resources and his MacGyver-ish solutions. And then at a certain point, I guess this is going to be a spoiler review, just FYI.
Oh, yeah.
At a certain point, he gets in contact with Earth, and they start trying to arrange some sort of rescue for him, and that becomes fairly involved, actually. And there's interesting parts of that story involving both the NASA administrators and how they handle things, and the crew of the ship that abandoned him and how they react to things. And then, of course, it ends with him either surviving or not surviving. He survives, but which I think someone I was talking to commented that the movie did a really good job in actually not. Yeah, it was my wife, and she said she wasn't sure if he was going to survive or not, and while watching the movie up until the very end. And it's interesting because reading the book, I was also not sure if he was going to survive until the end, because the story could have really it kept the tone sort of riding the line between a story that could have been a very somber tale about struggling and ultimately succumbing honorably to nature, versus a story about struggling triumphantly against nature, and a triumphant story about human ingenuity, and it goes the latter direction. So that was my summary.
It was good.
Yeah, and then to just follow up by briefly answering your question about my impression, I was honestly shocked at how faithful it was to the book. Like, I was not expecting them to be faithful to the book. I just figured that they would use the book sort of as raw materials. They would say, okay, neat concept. Now we're going to make this into a big Hollywood thing, and we're going to just. But on the contrary, the story follows it almost exactly, with a few parts cut out just sort of for narrative flow. And there's even like huge sections of dialogue that are just quoted verbatim from the book. I just was not expecting that.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. So this is a movie by Ridley Scott. I have an interesting and mixed history with Ridley Scott. I really like Alien. Not much else. I'm trying to think of a movie of his that I really enjoyed.
Gladiator?
I think you need to go back and watch Gladiator, because I don't think Gladiator's a good movie.
Yeah, see, I Gladiator is one of those weird movies where I just absolutely adored it when I was, when it came out. And then I think I have watched it again recently, and I've just sort of been seeing the corniness, actually. But
yeah.
Yeah.
So Ridley Scott's a director that, and I've said this before, I've compared him to a robot, because he makes technically amazing movies. They look beautiful. They sound beautiful. Everything's shot really well. But there's just this kind of intangible quality missing to the film. Like I've called it, they're missing humanity in the past, and I think that's worked in some of his films. Films like Alien, that works. Films like Blade Runner, where it's literally talking about robots trying to find humanity and human emotions, and it works in those films. This is a movie, when I first heard that Ridley Scott was doing it, that it's literally about humanity and survival, and how there's a lot of emotion to it. I was like, there's no way Ridley Scott is going to do this movie well. And he did. And the nicest thing I can say about this movie is that it doesn't feel like a Ridley Scott movie at all. It's still got the technically beautiful parts that you're used to from a Ridley Scott movie, but it also has a lot of humanity in it. It has a lot of emotion. These characters are so well written and well shown, and you identify with Mark Watney. You really get to like him by the end of the movie, but you do the same with all the other characters. And we'll get into the differences of the books, but that's something I felt the book didn't do a great job of. So the script to this really did amazing. In my opinion, it fixed all the problems I had with the book, which, like I said, we'll get into. But no, this was a great movie.
Yeah, I feel like there was a meeting where they said, okay, we've got Ridley Scott to direct this. How are we going to counteract the fact that he's going to, by default, make all the characters robots? Well, maybe we should make the main character be played by someone with just an enormous amount of like charisma and likability. Who would that be potentially? I feel like that's how the movie was constructed, because that's exactly what happens. Like I'm having a really hard time imagining anybody other than Matt Damon. Okay, let me put it another way. Anybody other than Matt Damon would have made this a different movie. Like
Absolutely.
You would feel differently toward the character. It might have been, just as good a movie, but like down home, lovable Matt Damon just like really anchors this story for you.
Absolutely. And so let's talk about Matt Damon for a little bit. I think he's one of the most underrated movie stars. I mean, obviously, he's really good at what he does, and that's why he's a star. But he's also a really talented actor, too. I don't know, speaking of talent, the talented Mr. Ripley, mm-hmm. I think is his best performance. It's nuanced and really well done. And I think he uses some of those acting chops here as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is, on the surface, a movie where he's talking to a computer camera for, half the movie. He's not really interacting with anyone else at all. He's just almost directly interacting with the audience. And yeah, I mean, like, as a bad comparison, like, can you imagine Ben Affleck in this role?
Right.
The two of them kind of hit it at the same time. But I mean, like, no way.
Yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't. I don't think it'd be as good at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, he does an incredible job. He makes you like the character, and that's something we talked about in the book. The Mark Watney character in the book is still very likable, and he's funny. He's got the same sense of humor, but he's also very. We don't get to see his emotions very much. We don't really get any emotional window into him, and that's something that the movie fixes, I think.
Yeah.
I think there are moments in the movie that show him like kind of losing it and
mm-hmm.
and almost giving up, but then not. And then even at the end of the movie where it showed like how skinny he had become and that they had the character grow the beard out, it kind of just shows you the trauma that this whole experience visited on him, which I think was kind of absent from the book.
Yeah, there was this interview between the author Andy Weir and Adam Savage from Mythbusters, and it's a great interview. I'll try to remember to link it in the show notes. And I recommend watching it. Just if you want some insight into the process of writing the book. But in it, Andy Weir fairly clearly states that he really thinks of astronauts as being like a higher tier of human. Like he sees them as being, first of all selected among a very elite group of people who just, in some sense don't have the same fear response as normal people, and then take those people and then just train the heck out of them until they really are sort of just like perfectly capable of handling stress and adversity and problems. So he seems to see astronauts this way, and so he's written the Mark Watney character as being like completely unflappable, and just being totally good humored about all of the things that are happening to him, even though he's perpetually on the verge of death. And I felt some reservations because I was thinking this is not going to translate well into a movie if they keep it this way. If Matt Damon is sort of stoically handling all these things, it's not going to be relatable. You're going to, there has to be a line between the character being too stoic that there's no drama. You don't feel any stakes, even though he's about to die, because you don't care. And on the other hand, sort of being too weepy, even though I'm sure a normal person would just sort of break down in this situation. You don't want your protagonist to do that, because that's not good movie watching. And I think this movie strikes the perfect balance, where there are definitely moments where Matt Damon is sort of crumbling, and then he always pulls himself together, and it just perfectly pulls you in and makes you care and want to see him survive.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good point. It does kind of skirt that line beautifully. And I mean, he's already kind of a person that's not relatable because he's mostly talking pretty complicated science. So you have to give that emotional relation, because the majority of the moviegoers can't relate to a guy, a botanist who knows how to grow stuff on Mars. So yeah, giving him that emotional anchor in the script really, I think, helped sell that. Speaking of that, this is a movie that's done really well. It's made $100 million in its first week. I think it pulled in another 30-something last week. It's doing really well. It's going to be very profitable. It's a very populist movie. And by that I mean, I think anyone can go into the movie and find something to enjoy in it, which to me is kind of shocking, because it's a very hard science fiction story. Mm-hmm. Even in the book is very hard sci-fi. They spend a lot of time talking about the specifics of everything that he's doing to survive. The movie cuts some of that out, but it's still a lot of science in the movie. But people are responding and identifying with this movie. All kinds of people like you and me that love the nerdy science fiction stuff, but people that don't as well. And I have friends that don't really like movies, and they want to see this film. It's very surprising to me. It makes sense after seeing the movie, but the fact that this is pulling in that kind of crowd, I guess, is a testament to the type of film that they've created.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember commenting previously that this book wouldn't have even been published if it had been submitted to a normal publisher, because it's simply too heavy on the science.
Right, and I guess that's something that we should mention, is that this book was not published through the normal means. Andy Weir self-published it online, correct?
Yes, he published it in installments as a web serial, sort of like Worm, which I discuss in a review, actually.
Right.
He sort of grew his own audience just by appealing to pretty much nerdy people who cared about reading excruciating details about how to create water from hydrazine, etc. But I think that just that, saying that by itself diminishes what he actually did, because what he really did is he made a great Robinson Crusoe. Is that the right thing? Am I referencing the right thing?
No, yeah.
A great Robinson Crusoe type, like, survival story, Hardy Boys type survival story, and it just happened to be set on Mars. And then he injected a pleasing amount of science. And then what the movie does, I think, is it pulls back the science just a bit, but not so much that it's insulting to anyone, and then amplifies the dramatic aspects of the Robinson Crusoe story, which is really a very basic, fundamental man versus nature story, which is very sort of universally compelling, and it's great. I think it's so successful because it's actually very simple in formula.
Yeah, I agree, and I think building on that, one of the biggest problems I had with the book was that it and not to say I don't think Weir did a bad job at all, but it has a very specific kind of rigid formula, something bad happens, Mark Watney finds a way to solve it. And this happens over and over and over again. We talked about, when we were talking about the book, how I was worried that this kind of thing translated into the movie would get boring. And what they did was they found the issues that were least important to the dramatic theme of the book, and they just cut them out.
Yeah.
So him losing contact again with NASA, that was cut out. The whole giant storm that he had to navigate, in the book, as he was making his way to the second crater, he had to navigate around this giant storm that was blocking his solar panels from getting enough sunlight to actually be able to recharge his little buggy. That was completely cut out. When the thing flipped again. And so, I mean, when we first read this book, I was thinking to myself, what could they cut? And these things didn't even occur to me. But after seeing the movie, it's like, well, that was perfect. Because there's enough that happens wrong to him that it sells the fact that he's in constant danger, and he's only surviving because he's smart enough to figure this stuff out. So those other things we didn't need. So it was totally okay that it was cut. And it just worked so well. Like, I actually, thinking about how he figured out the storm in the book and how he triangulated his location to figure out which way it was moving and all this stuff, that just wouldn't have worked in film at all.
Yeah.
Like, that would have been a really boring scene.
Right. I think this is a perfect example of adapting a story to fit a medium. The thing about a web serial is serial fiction in general almost has to follow a formula of repeated cliffhangers, because you want to keep your audience coming back every week because you're posting the thing in weekly installments. So the author is highly motivated to come up with some terrible twist at the end of every chapter, and I see it over and over again in the various web serials that I read and that I have read, and usually those types of twists do not work as well in a novel, and they certainly don't work as well in a movie, because there's no need for repeated cliffhangers in a movie, obviously, because you're just sitting there for 2 consecutive hours. So yeah, I agree. There was nothing lost. In fact, I think it was just an excellent streamlining decision to get rid of that stuff and spend more relative screen time on what the people in NASA are doing. Speaking of that, they had
excellent
some
segue.
They had some great actors, or great acting, I guess I should say, that really made me care about that part, whereas I didn't care about it in the book very much. I almost felt it was a distraction from the Mars stuff. But I was just as engrossed in the NASA stuff in the movie.
Yeah, I agree, and I think part of that is, like you said, the excellent casting. I mean, Jeff Daniels, Sean Bean. I'm blanking on how to pronounce.
I don't know how to pronounce his name. Yeah.
I was gonna try, but I thought it would be better to just not. All the NASA people are really well cast, and they're definitely much better characterized than in the book. To be quite honest with you, whenever it jumped back to NASA in the book, I was having a hard time differentiating who was who. Obviously, that's not as difficult a problem in a film medium when you're looking at them, and it's not just names. But more than that, I think it did a much better job characterizing these people. We cared much more about them. We kind of understood their motivations. I think Jeff Daniels' character is I think you mentioned before that he's kind of the closest there is to a villain. Yeah. In the book and the movie, in that he's not really actively trying to hurt the rescue attempts, but he's just being business minded about everything. Yeah. I think Jeff Daniels sells that character so well.
Yeah, and that's something the book gets into in more detail, is like the conflict of is it worth it to spend what must be hundreds of millions of dollars to save one life? And I mean, really ethically, it's not. Like, you don't even have to ask that question. Like, you can save a life by donating like $10 to a mosquito net fund or a malaria fund or something,
Right.
If you're talking about the actual ethical uses of money, it's ridiculous to think that we should spend hundreds of millions of dollars to save one guy. But there's like a greater level to the story. Or I guess you should say the counter argument to that is that this isn't just about saving one man. This is about like our commitment to being explorers and our commitment to honoring our explorers. And I don't know, I could kind of go on, but there's a value to saving the fictional Mark Watney that is beyond just saving one man's life. The movie doesn't really go into that as a debate. It just shows that Jeff Daniels is taking a very pragmatic approach. And his position is that he wants to make sure that the space program survives this. One man's life. He'll save one man if that's what it takes, but he's trying to be pragmatic about it. And almost everyone else is actually being swept up in the emotion of saying like, "Oh, we need to save him," when really it's tremendously high cost to save one life.
Yeah. Well, but I like that. I mean, I like that it didn't really try to delve into that theme too much, because this is a super optimistic movie, and that's why one of the reasons I like it so much is that I mean, in reality, would China have given us their booster rocket, basically canceling their entire mission? Would that have happened? Probably not.
Yeah.
But this movie treats it as like, of course we're going to do that. Like the movie in the book. Yeah. In the book, they give up the rocket for a seat on the next Mars mission. Right. And the movie shows that by showing a Chinese astronaut on the next mission, but it never explicitly says it. It doesn't show the negotiation. It's just, we can help the Americans out. We can help them save their guy, so we're going to do it. Yeah. And that's like, I love that optimism, because you don't see that in a lot of movies. And I mean, that's the whole theme of this movie is kind of that mankind, when we work together, we can figure out any problem, we can solve anything. And I loved how the movie showed that. Even if the one thing that surprised me is there was that the part at the very end of the book when he talks specifically about how, like, when the book kind of hammers home the theme, when it's Mark Watney at the very end talking about how if there's a problem, no matter what's going on, people will get together and solve it. They had those lines in the trailer, but I guess they cut them from the final film. But it actually didn't need it, because it hammers home that theme well enough on its own.
Yeah, it's funny. That's a really great point, that this is such an optimistic movie. It almost reminds me of sort of the Gene Roddenberry view of the future, where humanity has sort of triumphed over our baser nature, and we're all just cooperating toward this really sort of visionary goal of space, the final frontier. It's almost, I'm going to choose in my headcanon from now on to view The Martian as the first Star Trek movie. It's the prequel to all the other Star Trek films.
All right, so would it be the best Star Trek movie then?
Yes. Well, I don't know. I'd have to go through all my. I mean, it's funny because this is obviously a tangent, but all of the last several Star Trek movies that they made were not at all optimistic. They were just like laser gun battle, brutal movies with they're just action movies using the Star Trek branding and characters. Right. And they were very disappointing to anyone who's actually a Star Trek fan. So you're making me realize for the first time that this movie The Martian very much appeals to the Star Trek part of my brain.
Well, and even pushing further into that, the best Star Trek stories are ones that didn't have a villain. Yeah. Which is this movie. And that's one thing again that you're right. The first two, or the newest new Star Trek films haven't gotten right, is they always need this big villain that our characters are fighting against. In reality, Star Trek is a story about a bunch of scientists struggling against just issues that come up and working together as a team. Yeah. I mean, that's really what Star Trek was, and you're absolutely right. This falls much closer into that than anything else. Yeah,
or communicating successfully with strange aliens, not killing strange aliens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Martian Star Trek movie, it's official.
Yeah.
Daily Planet approved.
That's my new. Yep, there we have it.
So let's talk a little bit about the Hermes crew then.
Okay.
Because this was another thing that I think the movie did way better than the book, was characterizing all these people. First of all, they're all amazingly cast. Like, I can't get over how many good actors are in this movie. I love Michael Pena. We talked a little bit about him on Ant-Man, and I know you haven't seen that. He was hilarious in that movie, and he's great here. He's the pilot Martinez, if you forgot. He's great. Kate Mara is really great. Jessica Chastain is excellent. Who else? I'm trying to think of. There was Vogel, right? I can't remember that actor's name.
The German, yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, the crew, there were still one or two crew members who, to me, never really were fully fleshed out, but I didn't really care. Like, it wasn't. I'm not complaining. That's not a complaint. I'm just observing that, like, you can't actually flesh out every single character in a movie that has lots of characters. They fleshed out the ones who you cared about. You know, the captain. You know, she was obviously. I was worried because I've only ever seen her in Zero Dark 30, and I thought that performance was a little bit robotic, and I was worried that she wouldn't be able to sort of project the amount of conflict that she was supposed to be experiencing, but I think she projected exactly what she needed to project for this movie.
Yeah, I like her a lot. I liked her in Zero Dark 30, but that's a conversation for another time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think what the movie did really well was really cement that relationship between Watney and her. And by I don't mean romantic relationship or anything. I just mean that the guilt she felt for leaving him behind is focused on a lot more in the film. And then I think that's kind of hammered home when one of the big changes that was made from the book was that she's the one that actually goes out there to get him. When in the book, I think it was just one of the other guys went and grabbed him at the final intercept at the very end of the movie. And that obviously was done to kind of complete that arc where she feels guilty. It's her fault in her mind, so she needs to be the one that's out there risking her neck to save him. So I really liked that change. Mm-hmm. I also liked that they actually let him Iron Man through space.
Yeah.
Which... I mean, I don't know how scientifically accurate that would have been. I think that'd be actually impossible to control. But in the book, that's mentioned, but it's just thrown out as a really stupid idea, and they don't let him do it.
Yeah.
But I did enjoy that he got to do that.
Yeah, I mean that part where she goes out to save him, I have thought about that a little bit. I haven't quite come to any conclusions, but it definitely touches on the idea that Andy Weir sees these astronauts as being almost superhuman, and what I mean by that is in the book she's very calmly and adequately commanding everyone else to do what they need to do from the command center, and that's her job because she's the commander, and the commander of the aircraft carrier or whatever doesn't run around frantically trying to aim the guns. He just trusts that his crew is going to do as they're ordered. So it is an interesting choice to have her not do that in the movie, to have her actually want to do everything for herself. And justification, which she verbalizes, is that she's not, she doesn't want to lose another man, or she doesn't want to risk another man's life on this mission, which, I don't know, I feel like I'm nitpicking, but it's like, you're constantly risking everyone's life. It's a dangerous space mission.
Right.
And you know that. So ultimately, it's almost a manifestation of her character succumbing to weakness rather than rising above it. But I'm happy to just disagree. I don't know. I don't care too much about it, honestly. But I see why they did that. I see why you have to do that in a movie to make her actually have a closed arc. as a character, that she
Yeah.
feels this guilt, she has to act on it. She can't just. You could argue that her acting on it is her decision to turn the ship around, but I think it's more visually concrete that she is the one to go and save him.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's logically it doesn't make any sense, but I think thematically and emotionally it kind of had to happen. And I think when I saw it happening, I had kind of the same reaction you did, where I was like, oh really, they're gonna make her do it? That doesn't make any sense. She's probably not as well trained to operate the space stuff. Like, he's clearly the guy that does the spacewalks. That's happened when they intercepted with the supply run thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think as I saw it kind of play out, I realized that that's kind of a perfect way to close her arc. So I mean, sometimes you gotta make concessions for that. I think I probably liked it a little better than you did, but
yeah, I think it was just kind of another example of changing the story to fit the medium, and it probably did work better in film. Yeah, I'm not going to complain too much about that.
Yeah. All right. So I want to get into something that we've talked about before, but I think this serves as a good comparison. I want to talk about Interstellar and how it compares to this movie. The reason I want to do that is because when I first saw Interstellar, especially after the first trailer, I don't know if you remember that first trailer where they talked about the space program and, mankind's need to explore and realize its full potential and all that. It made it seem like a film that would like spur kids' interest in the space program again, would get everyone interested in space exploration again. I don't think it did that, but I do think this movie could potentially do it. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it even set out to do that, but I think just taking the optimistic tone, talking about mankind's ability to work together to solve problems, and I think it makes NASA look really cool. Mm-hmm. So I think this succeeded in my mind where Interstellar failed. And that might me just being biased because I didn't really like that movie. But I'd be interested to hear, your opinion on it.
Well, my first thought is that I remember seeing at least a couple of different headlines, or maybe it was a tweet or Facebook or something, about how there were like miles-long lines at JPL for tourists to go visit.
Oh, wow.
So I think there's just, a touch of empirical evidence that I think your intuition is right, that this is, actually spurring people's interest in science. I noticed a lot of, this is PG-13, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I noticed a lot of...
Yeah, because they say the F word twice.
Twice, apparently. Yeah, exactly. And then they cut off several more and use asterisks. I noticed a lot of, like dads with their sons, or families with their kids. I guess I say that because I just happened to be sitting in front of a dad with his son. But anyway, it definitely seems to be a movie. I don't know if it was explicitly marketed that way, but it seems to be a movie where parents are thinking like, oh, I should take my kids to this because it's an optimistic space movie, and I can be virtually guaranteed that no one's going to be shot and there's not going to be a gratuitous sex scene. So it's just like it's sort of accidentally a really good family movie, actually. That's a tangent from what you were actually asking, but the point is, I think it's being seen by a lot of kids. I don't think Interstellar was seen by a lot of kids because it's this weird high concept movie that's confusing.
Right. It would be like saying 2001 encouraged people to want to be in NASA. I don't think that happened.
Yeah. It may have, but I don't think it happened.
As much as Interstellar was interested in making sure science was accurately shown in the film, it's not really a science-y movie. It's not showcasing the coolness of all this space stuff.
Yeah. Nor is it even an exploration movie, and in fact neither is 2001 really. Those are actually both movies about weird, like, super intelligent time travel entities interfering in human affairs. And
2001's exploration in the sense of exploring mankind, but not like exploring space.
Yeah. And this movie, there's the parts where he's talking about how wherever he goes, he's the first person who's been there, and that's just a really sort of universally compelling idea to people, I think.
Yeah.
And makes being an explorer seem cool. I remember being a kid and thinking being an astronaut would be cool, but then like at a certain point, it stops seeming as cool. But this movie successfully made me feel like it was just an intrinsically cool thing again. So yes, to answer your question in the most winding and long-winded way possible, yes, I think that this movie actually has a much better chance of sparking kids and people in general interest in science and specifically in space exploration.
And this is only occurring to me just now as we speak. The scene at the end when he's now training future astronauts, it's almost as if he's talking to the audience.
Mm-hmm.
I know we see the astronauts, but I don't think he ever actually looks right at the camera or anything as cheesy as that. But it's almost as if he's talking to real life future astronauts at that point.
Yeah, and it's fairly obvious that the people in that room hold him in extreme awe and may have even been inspired by him.
Right.
So,
yeah,
that's a good point. Yeah, and that scene is not in the book unless I'm
no, it's not.
mistaken.
You're right.
Yeah,
that was completely added.
And that's another great addition. That works much better in film, I think.
So do you think we're gonna see more of these movies now? I mean, we've got, I think Gravity was a couple years ago. I won't put Interstellar in this list because I don't think it's comparable to the other two. We've got Gravity a couple years ago. This now, I mean, is this the trend of it's making a lot of money, so you got to figure there are other scripts out there that people are going to try to get made now.
Well, I'll use this as an opportunity to shoehorn in a topic that I wanted to talk about on our practice podcast, but didn't get a chance to, which is Elon Musk. And I think Elon Musk and his space company is doing a huge amount to popularize the idea of space flight in general and exploring and colonizing Mars specifically. I didn't see it, but I believe he was on the new Colbert show, whatever that's called, talking about colonizing Mars with by bombing the ice caps to melt water, which most people in the know think that he just said to sort of stir the pot and get people talking. But anyway, the reason I bring Elon Musk up in this context is to say, I think people are getting interested in space again. We had sort of especially after the Cold War, when the spending sort of dried up, we just stopped being interested in it culturally because there seemed to be all these other more mundane problems. But I think maybe we as a culture can get excited about it again and make it a cool thing to be excited about again. And this movie hopefully is setting us on a trajectory in that direction.
Yeah, and I think that the thing that people don't realize, and that I didn't even realize until I found these facts, but it might seem like our space program hasn't really done much for us. But, the reason we have personal computers is because of the space program, because NASA had to fit a computer on a rocket. So they had to find a way to shrink it down. I mean, that's where the personal computer originated from. So, and there's countless other instances of technology that were invented specifically for NASA, for space exploration, that practical uses were later discovered and used on Earth. So if you're just even speaking economically, it makes sense. Mm-hmm. I agree. I hope this is the start of something.
Well, yeah, and then I personally think that it's probably going to be like, if you told somebody about iPhones in in 1990, they would have thought you were just insane. Likewise, I think, within a shockingly short period of time, we're going to have the capability to begin harvesting resources from these enormous near-Earth asteroids that are just sort of constantly orbiting Earth and really within easy reach. And the dollar figures attached to actually obtaining these resources are just, they dwarf like the economies of whole countries, in the sense that you just could never even get this many resources out of the ground. So there's a lot of reason to be optimistic that maybe there wasn't 20 years ago, because there wasn't the technology and there wasn't the economic will, and I think now there is. So I'm not sure whether I'm still talking about movies or whether I'm talking about reality, but I think there will be more movies about space, simply because reality will be more about space.
Well, I think movies reflect culture, right? So if people are more interested in space travel, there will be more movies about space travel.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I am out of stuff to talk about.
Yeah, me too.
The Martian is awesome.
Yeah, highly recommend.
Both the film and the book. If you haven't seen the movie, well, we just kind of spoiled the whole thing for you, but you should probably still see it.
See it anyway. I read somewhere that going to see something after having it spoiled doesn't statistically diminish your enjoyment of that thing.
Well, I mean, yeah, we're good examples. We had read the book, we knew exactly how this ended, and I still enjoyed the hell out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, that's really all we had for you guys this week. A little bit of a shorter one, probably because we didn't have a third person to talk this time around, so not as much to say. But we will be back next week. As always, we haven't picked our topic yet because we like to do that really last minute, because it makes it more fun and exciting. Matt, do you have anything coming down the pipe that you want to talk about?
I don't think I have any reviews in progress right now, but we are going to be starting a newsletter, and we ask you, to give us your email address, and we'll give you a weekly update with entertainment news, our entertainment picks for the week, and just sort of a general update. We'll be rolling that out possibly this week, and so I'll be broadcasting that on all of our available channels when that's ready.
Sounds good. As for me, I've got a review of Bridge of Spies, the new Steven Spielberg movie, coming out. The movie comes out Friday, so I'm going to try to drop that review Friday, which means, mental note to myself, that I need to write that review. I also have a review of the Peter Pan movie coming out here in a couple days. We've got a lot more fun things planned coming up. I mentioned the Daily Planet Book Club last week, and then at the beginning of the episode here, we were a little delayed on that as we're trying to figure out the best schedule and how all that works. So we haven't released our calendar schedule for when we're going to make the different sections due quite yet. Matt, I think we were talking next week that we'll probably do that. So
I think that would be a good choice.
Yeah.
I know I've got a few people I know who've read it, so maybe we could invite some people of that vein to be guests.
Absolutely, as long as they don't spoil the end of the book if
Good
we're
point.
reading one of the first sections.
Good point. But we don't care about spoilers. So.
No, spoilers actually aren't important at all.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read you all the big spoilers from every pop culture, and you won't care at all.
Yeah.
All right, starting with Game of Thrones.
Bruce Willis is Ghost the whole time.
Snape kills Dumbledore.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's really all we had. Matt, where can we find you?
I'm on Twitter at MORIDINAMAEL, and you'll probably find me on Google Plus and Facebook if you look. How about you, Scott?
I am also on Twitter at Scott Daly, Daly 85. You can also find us on our website Twitter, which is at Daily Planet Films, also spelled Daly. And you can find us all on our website, www.dailyplanetfilms.com, where we update almost daily.
Mm-hmm.
We try our best. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. Matt, thanks as always for talking to me about this great film. And we will see you all next week.
See you next week.